All right, welcome back. Joining me now for the interview is Brad Starks. He is a highly acclaimed producer and the director of one of his newest projects, Muku Muku. Mr. Starks, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Wow, Mr. Starks. Man, call me Mr. Starks. I start to look around for like my grandfather or my late dad. I'm like, whoa, call me Brad, please. But it is so great to be back. Thank you so much for having me on the show yet again. It is thrilling to actually be a part of your journey, and I feel flattered that you're excited to talk to me more about the show or whatever it is you would like to ask me.
Thank you so much. Where were you and what exactly were you doing when you found out that Vice President Kamala Harris would be replacing Joe Biden on the ticket?
Wow. You know what? I was at home working on the show. I was drafting up a couple of letters to send to city council members.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you this, prior to that, the weekend that Joe Biden basically sort of like went into his think tank. We had found out that he had COVID, I believe, on Thursday or Friday of
Mhm.
the subsequent sort of like the end of that tail end week. And I was reading reports that, there was mounting pressure. People were starting to kind of like talk about having him sort of step aside and this kind of like thing. He was vehemently sort of fighting against it. But then I read something that said that for maybe like the past week and a half, he had been talking to Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Jamie Raskin. So that weekend, I was just like, you know what? Either Sunday or on Monday, he's going to say whether or not he's going to step down.
Mm.
So I was at home to answer your question, and I knew for a fact that if he sidestepped and picked anyone other than Kamala, it was not going to go well for the
Yes.
Democratic Party. Let's just say that.
I mean, to that point, I will just say, as a political observer, like watching the Democratic Party infighting, I definitely was saying, I was like, if he picks anyone or just steps down and doesn't do an endorsement, the thought of an open convention is going to be completely chaotic, especially after the 3 weeks of that talk. So with this news, I wanted to ask you, I was 4 years old when Barack Obama was elected back in 2008. It was a very historic moment, the first Black president elected in a country where many didn't think that could be possible. Not only defying the odds, but rallying and amassing young voters among millions to cast their vote for him. In relation to the news with Kamala Harris, I've been hearing that this energy is not only bigger than 2008, but also more um, palpable and hopeful. I wanted to ask your take on that, and do you believe that to be sort of accurate?
I absolutely believe that to be true. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, literally, just for the fact of who she is, uh, she literally shortened the distance in the polls between her and Donald Trump in 2 days.
Mhm.
Within the first 48 hours, she raised more money for her campaign than any presidential candidate in history, including Barack Obama. So
Wow.
yeah, that was palpable energy that was out there. That is unrefutable. And you have a situation now where you have a past prosecutor, probably one of the best, that the country's ever produced, going up against a man who has 34 felonies
Yeah.
against him and a slew of other, court battles just waiting for him.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is palpable. It is undeniable, and this is the time. This is her time. I mean, with abortion on the ballot, there's nobody better than a
Yeah.
woman, and especially a black woman, to talk about these things. I mean, like, let's be serious for a second here. I mean, um, this whole abortion sort of debate and this question, it's not going to affect white women with money. White women with money can go wherever they want worldwide to get
Mhm.
things taken care of. It's going to affect black, it's going to affect indigenous people, it's going to affect poor white people as well. So women have an extremely great opportunity to save us
Yes,
this time
yes.
around, for sure.
In regard to the change on this ticket, we're sort of seeing the sort of like this the scaredness on behalf of the Trump campaign in terms of what they're trying to do in beefing up this sort of inflammatory, just downright racist and misogynistic campaign against the vice president. So because they really have nothing to go after her for, and most of what they were banking on is Trump versus Biden, the rematch, they're sort of resorting to the roots of essentially that's deeply rooted within the Republican Party, going for the race, going for the misogyny. They're even sort of criticizing her laugh and her fashion because they have nothing else to go off of. I mean, these are just really brazen and desperate attempts. What do you make of that?
Oh yes. Well. It's exactly how you just ended that sentence. It is brazen and desperate. And let's be totally honest here. Unfortunately, the GOP is run by a bunch of guys who are threatened by women who are very smart
Mhm.
and who are well educated. They are also conversely deathly afraid of guys like you and me who are of color, who are educated, who can speak their minds, and who understand that the continuing strategy of the GOP is to keep middle class and lower class people arguing against each other and
Yes.
not focus on the real issues at hand. Again, I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for all marginalized people. I mean, and I'm not just talking about black people as a whole. Our Asian brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
I have friends who live in New York who don't get on the subway anymore because they're just attacked.
Yeah.
And all of that comes from the GOP and our former president Donald Trump um, putting these lies and saying these hateful, racial things. What I would say is, if that's the best they have, is that kind of rhetoric, bring it,
Yeah.
because you and I, well, hey man, the life expectancy. I would love to find this out. The life expectancy of guys like you and me might be like 25. If you live, if you live in an area, maybe like in the South, that is heavily policed, it's probably even less than that.
Mhm.
So, it's important that America, especially the GOP, if this is how they want to run their campaign, I hope they will do it, because America needs to have a mirror held up to itself to see
Yeah.
that ugliness. You know, I really believe that.
In terms of democracy being on the balance and women's rights having been under attack and lots of other things in terms of the extremely, extremely hyper partisan conservative Supreme Court, what we're seeing here is sort of a mobilization on all fronts. People, sort of converging to collectively organize and vote for Kamala Harris in November. Do you think that the Republican Party has underestimated um sort of what they've done in terms of, just saying things like overturning Roe v. Wade was popular? I feel like, and another thing, I really feel like let me ask you the question, sorry.
Sure, sure, sure.
Do you feel like the Republican Party has not only underestimated women voters, but also young voters for this upcoming election?
Oh, yes. I mean, if if they had a nickel for every time they've underestimated Gen Z and women voters at a whole, uh, they'd have all the money that they would need to run or to put towards something positive. But yeah, I mean, the pick to pick JD Vance of anyone for a running mate, just he absolutely adds nothing to the
Yeah.
ticket. If anything, he, would you pick someone who calls you like a modern day Hitler? If
Exactly.
you're trying to get, if you're trying to get, if you're trying to get suburban housewives to jump on board, do you then go ahead and pick someone who basically makes fun of unmarried women, and then also conversely says, if you're in a terrible situation where you're being physically abused or mentally
Mhm.
abused, whatever, you should just stay in the marriage? No, I mean, there is, and then, oh, don't even get me started on these gold sneakers that Trump did to appeal to black people,
Oh my
and the mugshot and all this stuff. I mean, it's just so out of touch. But
God.
the one thing that you can say about the GOP and MAGA and Trump followers, they're very consistent. They're very consistent that way. So, there's this saying, if you see a man digging a hole for himself, stand back and let that happen. So I
Yeah.
think, the proof will is in the pudding, and you just see all of this enthusiasm going behind Kamala Harris. So yeah.
My younger brother, he's about to enter his freshman year of high school. He's not yet eligible to vote, but he's excited about this election. What would you say to the youth in our nation who are euphoric about this news? They are laughing at the memes on TikTok. They're creating these fan-loving edits about the vice president, but are not yet registered to vote. It's one thing to have that momentum, but to not let it go to waste in November.
Definitely, definitely. I agree with you on that. And we have 100 days left until it's time to go to the ballot box. So yeah, I encourage all of Gen Z folks to go out and get registered immediately. It takes less than 5 minutes. It takes less time to register to vote to do one of those funky sort of like TikTok dances. I mean, my but I'll tell you what, I mean, moving forward, what you will see is grassroots mobilization. Stacey Abrams is still out on the case.
Mhm.
I mean, she did an incredible job. I mean, we owe a lot to her to have Biden like where Biden and Kamala where they are right now. I think what you'll probably start seeing is the Kamala Harris campaign reaching out to all the top TikTok people,
Mm.
all the top Gen Z people, and there will be a huge push for that. So, yeah, things are going to get very dynamic leading up to the convention for sure.
Once again, my guest is Brad Starks. He's a highly acclaimed producer and the director of one of his newest projects, Moku Muku. Brad, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank
Aloha.